Hi bakers, I'm Sally, and today I'm showing you how to make a fan favorite cake recipe you can make for so many occasions. This is my classic white layer cake. This is a vanilla flavored cake with a soft and fluffy crumb, and it's actually the base of so many other cake flavors that I've developed, like my chocolate chip cake, my coconut cake, pistachio cake, and my strawberry cake. If you're new to baking and have never made a layer cake before, this is a great one to start with, and it's likely one you'll turn to again and again. Let's get started. We're going to start with dry ingredients. In this bowl here, I have cake flour. This is baking powder and baking soda, and then some salt. And we're going to whisk together the dry ingredients, just a little bit until they're all nice and combined. And we'll set this aside. Next, we're going to cream butter and sugar together, and this will contribute to the soft, fluffy crumb that this cake has. This is room temperature butter. Make sure that it's still cool to the touch and not overly soft or greasy. And some regular white sugar. And we're going to get this going. And we're going to beat this together on high speed until it's light and creamy. The key to this recipe is to use the proper ingredients. Cake flour and egg whites will give us that nice, light, pristine crumb. And full fat sour cream is going to add some nice, tender richness to the cake. And make sure that you reach for pure vanilla extract. You'll want to skip imitation vanilla because you can really taste the difference in a cake like this. This is going to beat for about 3 minutes until it's that nice, creamy consistency, and then we'll add the egg whites. Okay, this is looking nice and creamed. It's light and fluffy. I'm going to use a spatula just to scrape down the sides. I have 5 egg whites here. Let's pour it right in and get that mixing. Using only the egg whites to maintain a nice light and white crumb, we're skipping the egg yolks in this recipe. To make up for the lack of egg yolks, we'll use full fat sour cream. It adds richness and moisture without weighing the crumb down like the egg yolks would. I'm going to stop the mixer, scrape down the sides and the paddle attachment here. Make sure we got everything. This is looking so beautifully creamed, nice and smooth already. I'm going to mix it one more time, and then we'll add the sour cream and vanilla. Okay, this is good. Add the sour cream and the vanilla. Mix just until it's incorporated. Okay, we've got our dry ingredients. All right, let's get this going on low speed, and while the mixer's running, we're going to add whole milk. And this will thin out the batter nicely to produce that nice light crumb that we're looking for. And we'll mix it just until it's incorporated. You'll want to avoid over mixing this batter. Okay, that is nice and smooth. For the cake pans, I like to line them with parchment paper rounds. Now this is something I just made from a sheet of parchment paper. I traced the bottom of the cake pan and cut them out. And I'll have 2 of them. These provide a really nice non-stick surface for the cake so they very easily release from the cake pans. Got my cake pans here. So what I like to do is spray these with non-stick spray, lay in the parchment paper rounds, and then spray those too, just to really make sure these cakes don't stick. Again, I'm using non-stick spray. You can, of course, grease these with butter instead. Lay these in. And spray them one more time just for safety. Make sure they slide right out of the cake pans. For dividing the cake batter, I'm just going to eyeball it today. If you have a food scale at home, you can of course weigh them to make sure that they're identical. These cakes will bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. They take about 24 to 25 minutes. Just going to smooth the tops, make sure they're nice and even. Perfect. And they're ready to bake. If your oven has hot spots, you may want to rotate the pans and switch their positions halfway through baking to make sure they bake evenly. Once they finish baking, let these cool for 1 hour in the pan, and then remove them and let them cool directly on the cooling rack. Today, I'm filling and topping this cake with vanilla buttercream, but you can think of this white cake as a canvas for so many different flavors and fillings, like a strawberry buttercream or a cream cheese frosting, maybe a Swiss meringue buttercream or a chocolate mousse filling, whatever your heart desires. But today, we'll just keep it classic, white cake with vanilla buttercream. The base of the buttercream is, of course, butter. This is softened, cool to the touch, just like it was for our cake. Get that nice and smooth and creamed, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. All right, this is nice and smooth and creamy. Scrape down the sides, and then we will add the other ingredients here. This is confectioner's sugar that's been sifted. Let's get that in there. The confectioner's sugar is what will obviously sweeten the buttercream, but it also thickens the buttercream nicely too. Here I have room temperature heavy cream. That is going to make it nice and creamy. And then some more pure vanilla extract. Some delicious flavor there. Get this going on low speed at first to avoid a powdered sugar explosion. And then we will gradually increase the speed to medium-high. All right, this is nice and creamy and combined. Once again, let me scrape down those sides and we will beat again. This time I'm going to add a little salt. I always say you can add salt to taste, but I always recommend maybe at least a pinch or 1/8 of a teaspoon. Okay. Beat it until everything is creamy and combined once again. I have a tip for your buttercream, and this works for this buttercream or any buttercream recipe you make. If you notice a lot of air bubbles in it and you want a nice smooth buttercream, ditch the mixer, grab a wooden spoon or a spatula, and mash it up against the sides of the bowl to help pop those air bubbles. Buttercream is done, and now let's level off those cake layers to make a nice sturdy cake. If you have a cake leveler, obviously you can use that for this step, but since not everyone has one, I'm going to use a serrated knife. So the purpose of leveling the cake is you're making a nice flat surface so the layered cake is nice and stable, and just remove that little top layer. Set it aside. For this second one, I am trying to match that first cake. There we go. Cakes are leveled and ready to go. This part shouldn't be too tricky because it's only a 2-layer cake. Grab our bottom layer. Okay, nice and flat and even on here. So you're going to want to take about 3/4 to 1 cup of frosting, and that will be in between the 2 cake layers. A nice thick layer of buttercream. And I'm using an offset spatula here. I'm going to spread it into a nice even layer. Okay, that looks even. Now for the second cake layer, I am going to flip it upside down so the top of the cake is flat. Okay, this looks good. Making sure it is even all the way around. And now I'm going to add what's called a crumb coat. And this is really just a thin layer of frosting that I'm going to put on top and lightly around the sides of the cake to lock in any crumbs. And I'm going to use about 1 cup of frosting for the crumb coat. Start with the offset spatula once again. Okay. Very thin layer of the frosting all the way around the cake. Grab more from the top here. And not only will this crumb coat catch any loose crumbs from the cake, it's going to stabilize the cake so it's nice and sturdy when it's time to cut into it. I'm just scraping off any excess, and we will use all of this to cover the whole cake. We'll refrigerate this crumb-coated cake for just about 20 minutes to set the crumb coat. Okay, let's finish it up. We'll add the rest of the frosting on top and all around the sides. And for this, I am using a straight icing spatula. You can use an offset spatula like I was using before for the crumb coat, or you can use just a regular knife if you don't have an offset or straight spatula. Feel free to make this cake look extra fancy if you want to grab some piping tips and pipe some of the buttercream on top and around the sides. I'm just gonna keep it classic and simple today. I'm going around the edges. This makes a generous amount of buttercream, so you have lots to work with. So what I usually do is I put all the frosting on top of the cake, and then I spread it over the edges. And then I work more and more down over the edge of the cake to get the sides. You can use a bench scraper to smooth out the sides of the cake. I like a little bit of texture for this cake, so I'm just kind of going around and smoothing it in different sections. For the final finishing touch, I like to add sprinkles. You can use fresh berries or fresh mint. Sprinkles are always a good choice. You can slice and serve this cake immediately, or you can set it aside for a few hours until you're ready to serve it. Ready for any occasion, you can't go wrong with the classic white cake. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you feel inspired to try a new baking recipe today. Head over to my website for the full written recipe and all of my success tips. You can also ask a question right there on the recipe page, and my team and I will be happy to answer.